welcome in, everyone. Hello. Seeing a lot of familiar faces in the chat. How's everyone doing? Welcome to the very first episode of MLB Trade Talk. And we have a very special co-host here, John of Baseball Trade Values. John, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing great, Robbie. How are you?
Oh, man. We're doing good. Summer vacation. Was just talking to you before we went live, and I can't express enough how much I enjoy summer vacation. But yeah, we're getting into the juicy part of basically the season. I mean, we've talked about this before. I feel like the trades. That's we all love the baseball. We all love going to the game, getting a hot dog, getting a cold one, watching a game, watching on your recliner at home. But we all love the trades. We love free agency. We love the trades even more, I think, is all the rumors and everything else included. But we're starting to get into that time. We're about a little more than a month out. It's not July 31st this year. It's August 2nd because they pushed it back a little bit because of the lockout. So we do have a little more than a month to go. But I feel like now is the right time to start kind of getting into who are the guys out there that we should be paying attention to. But before I do get started, just going over a couple of quick sponsors for today's show. We are partners with SeatGeek. Use my code HYDE, $20 off your first purchase. And also, don't forget, we are partners with Prize Picks. Use my code GINGER if you would like to have a 100% deposit match. But for the people that are here in the chat that have no idea what Baseball Trade Values is, it's an incredible website. John, how about you just dive into it? We have done an interview before, but I feel like this will be a little more relaxed. So just real quick, how did this website come together? You know, what is Baseball Trade?
So like you and everybody else probably listening and seeing us, I was always fascinated by trades. And I'm like, how did they figure that out? Like, how did they get, you got to figure both sides like the deal to agree with it, right? So they must think it's fair. Both sides have to think a deal is fair in order to get it done. So like, how did they figure it out? So I've got a part of my brain that just likes to figure stuff out. And I just started working on concepts. And the one that really works is the concept of surplus value. Now, what does that mean? That means basically if the guy is worth more than he's getting paid, that more part is the surplus, and that's what you're trading. If he's worth 20 million and his salary is only 10 million, he's got a surplus of 10. So if you're trading him, you want to get that extra 10 back. You're getting rid of his contract. That's the 10 part, and then you're getting another 10. So, so that's how it works. It's basic, simple math. It's A minus B equals C. Now, how do you figure out what he's worth on the field? It's sort of like the same game we do in the offseason where, like, how much is that guy going to make in free agency? Oh, let's give him 5 years for 100. So he's going to worth 20 million a year. I'm using simple examples, but basically if you figure out how much he's worth on the field, how much he would get in free agency, and if he's worth more than that, if he's outperforming his contract, then he's got surplus value. It can go the other way as well. You can get a guy who's underperforming his contract, and it shows up on our site as negative value because you got to pay that, right? So anybody trading for him, what they're really doing is they're trading for his contract, which means they're taking on his salary for a certain amount of time, the years of control that he's contracted for, or in the case of a guy who's not on a fixed contract, is early years, arbitration years, and so forth. So you don't have them for infinity. A lot of people don't realize that. Oh, let's trade for Shohei Ohtani. He's only got a year and a half left. So you're not going to get him for infinity, right? Yeah. So it's a business deal, right? You got to look at the salary they're making, the length of time. It's a contract that they're exchanging. So in the surplus,
there's a couple other things too, like injuries. Are they injury prone? So on. How like you said, what are their stats looking like? What is their projections, for the future? Are they projected to be
exactly? Well? So they have, each player sort of establishes a baseline after a while. Like, here's that type of player that, he's an all-star, or he's a regular, he's not a bench player, or whatever. Yeah. And then some will fluctuate. Some will have good years and bad years, and their value will go up a little bit from there. But you kind of know what the baseline is, right? Yeah. And so, but to your point, sometimes they get injured. But you want to know, if you're going to acquire that guy, you want to know what you're getting in the future, right? Because you don't care about the past, Yeah. But the past informs the future to a certain extent. So we got to use that to some degree to get an idea of what kind of player he is.
Right. And just for some examples, I just want to share the screen here with everyone at home. I'm not using the normal Streamlabs. I'm using StreamYard today, so a little different. But just to give you an idea of kind of what some like someone like Wander Franco, he's going to be the most expensive player out there. You're going to have to give up your whole farm basically for Wander Franco. And then we got guys like Jose Ramirez, Ronald Acuna Jr., Fernando Tatis Jr. Why? Because these guys are, first off, amazing players, but they're also not getting the big bucks at the same time. They're, what would you say? Would you call them bargains, John?
Definitely. That's the whole idea of like high surplus value. What you're looking at is the list of the most valuable players in baseball. What that means is they're projected to be worth a lot more than what they're actually going to make in salary. So Franco signed a deal really early, and it's like a long-term thing that's going to take him through his prime years. And he looks like he's going to deliver over and above that promise for many years. So that gives him a ton of surplus.
And then you have the opposite end of the spectrum with someone like Steven Strasburg, who currently on Baseball Trade Values has the worst value in Major League Baseball. Anthony Rendon just moved into the number 2 spot. So could you explain that for the guests? Like, why are these negatives so low?
Because unfortunately, the front offices made a bad deal. They thought the Nats, after they win the World Series, thought, let's lock up Steven Strasburg for multiple years, give him $36 million a year, $35 million a year, or something like that. And then he promptly gets injured and is pitched like 7 innings in the last 2-3 years. So again, doesn't look good from here either, because he's got the type of injuries that can be debilitating. So, he's got a tiny amount of surplus value, a tiny amount of field value, but he's owed $35 million a year. And a lot of that is back pay deferred. Right. So it's a deep underwater contract, which is why he's number 1. And Anthony Rendon, Rendon is
I'm sorry, keep going.
Rendon, the Angels were hoping, and unfortunately the Angels tend to make this mistake a little bit too often. They're paying him $35 million a year and gotten barely nothing out of him. He's injured yet again, and he's in his 30s. And guys in their 30s tend to have wear and tear on them, right? So their arc is down. They're not only going to probably start to decline in performance, but they're going to get injured more often. So they're really bad investments. So this is basically a list of bad investments.
Right. And like you said, these can fluctuate. These aren't like I think a lot of people think these are the set in stone numbers for the rest of time. I feel, you always see people out there be like, oh, how is that value right now? He's doing so good. Well, sometimes it takes a little time. You got to do some updates on here. Sometimes players' values are going to go up. Sometimes they're going to go down. I was actually just on earlier, and I noticed some of the players I was looking at, their values were different from the last time I had seen. So there's constant updates on Baseball Trade Values. So, but just in case anyone at home, if you do need to go look again, kind of, how everything is done here. If you didn't hear what we said, you can always go read everything right here under the tab where it says About. You can click on Background, and pretty much it kind of just goes into detail of how everything is done, valuing major leaguers as well as minor leaguers. So everything is really deep. What I like about the site is that everything is really detailed and just laid out pretty nicely. So
we're just trying to be a helpful guide for people who are wondering what's a fair deal.
Right. And, people just got to be negative Nancy's out there sometimes. You're just trying to help. Trying to help.
So we've been around for 3 years. There's been over 300 trades in that time, and we've gotten 95% of them right in the range what we said they would go for. So our history section will detail that. So we feel like we have some credibility now.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask really quick before we kind of dive in, how did so you said you were interested in trades and whatnot, kind of what sparked you to just make a website? How did that even come to
I got laid off. I'm like, what the heck I'm going to do now?
Sometimes something like that can end up being, a blessing in disguise.
4 years ago, I was like, you know what? And I'd been laid off a couple times before. I'm like, you know what? I got to take control of my life. Let's see. Oh, I'm really interested in this topic. Let's just play around and see where it goes. And I just started doing it. I had some time on my hands, and so I started doing it. I've since gotten another day job or two, but but I continued with this because I thought, well, this would be like a good insurance policy just in case it happens again, and it's growing, and who knows, maybe this will turn out to be the whole thing. So it's good to have that. It's good to have that sort of fallback just for anybody who wants to, don't necessarily quit your day job, but also, have something in reserve that you like to do and on your own, and it can become a thing.
Absolutely. And that's kind of how I am with my channel. It's like, enjoyed. I mean, I haven't lost my job or anything by any means, but it's just fun to do. I just enjoy doing it. And so, hey, summertime when I'm not working, it's perfect. So, but alrighty, enough of us blabbering on about whatever. Let's get to some trades. Let's get to some guys who we think are, going to be the highly sought after players out there. So I'm going to be sharing my screen quite a bit. But let's kind of talk. Well, I'm going to ask you. I'll give you the first player. Who do you think is the most highly sought after? Who's the prize of the market in your opinion?
I'm going to go a little bit with a surprise pick, because most people would say Luis Castillo, and I'm going to say Frankie Montas. Now, they're very similar. Their numbers are very similar. Their years of control very similar. Their salaries are very similar. Castillo is a little bit more of a high-profile name because he's sort of perceived as an ace and has been for a while now. But Montas has been sneaky good for the last couple of years, like really good, like a top 10 kind of good pitcher. And he's been playing in Oakland. This year's on a bad team and not getting as much attention, but he is good. He throws 98 easily. He's got this deadly splitter, and a good slider, and he confuses people. He overpowers people. He's always off, always keeping those hitters off balance. And I think, I think he's a slightly better value than Castillo. We've got him at 34-ish surplus value, Castillo at about 40. So, but they're very similar pitchers. So, and, very similar deals would be had to get either one of them.
Yeah, it's funny because I was just talking with a friend about Luis Castillo, because he actually asked me, who would you rather have? Would you rather have Frankie Montas or Luis Castillo? My answer was, well, you can kind of go either way because they're very similar. Montas maybe has a little more velocity, a little more overpowering kind of stuff, where Castillo, I would say, maybe has a little more finesse. But when you look at the numbers, they're both very similar numbers. Even when you look at like ground ball percentage, fly ball percentage, very similar. For Frankie Montas, what teams do you think are, if you were to kind of lay it out there, what teams do you think would be, I wouldn't say what teams will go after him, but what teams do you think would maybe make the most sense?
So we've heard rumors about the Twins, about the Cardinals, and about the Dodgers. I think the Dodgers make the most sense off the top of my head because I think they need another starter. And it makes sense from the A's perspective because they've got the not only just the depth of prospects, but there's sort of the interesting sort of combinations. We were talking before the show started. Like sometimes a farm may be okay, but they don't quite have the right combination of players that the other team wants. And so it's hard to find a match because one guy may be 50 and the next guy might be 10, and you're like, well, then you got they're not going to trade the guy who's worth 50. I'm thinking about the Braves, for example, and Michael Harris, who's like 50-ish. And then after that, there's a big drop off, right? So Montas to the Braves doesn't make as much sense because they'd be cobbling together a guy worth like 10 and 8 and 5 or whatever, like not going to get there. But the Dodgers, they've got a few guys in the 20s, and then there are a couple more guys in the teens, and like, okay, you can play around with a couple combinations easily there. And I think that makes a lot of sense. The A's and the Dodgers have hooked up in deals in the past, so that's probably my best guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with Frankie Montas and Luis Castillo, I'm a big believer, a big fan of playing to your strengths as well. Like for example, like I've loved what Michael Wacha and the Red Sox have done this year. They have completely built their defense for him. If you really look at it, they're shifting a lot more behind him, playing really, they have a good infield defense this year, and Wacha is getting a ton of ground balls. Now, where with Montas and Castillo, do you think like teams where like the Dodgers, when you look at their, if you're on Baseball Savant, if you're looking at their infield defense, the Dodgers don't necessarily rank extremely well when it comes to infield defense. They have -12 outs above average. Do you kind of do you think teams kind of go that route where they're like, maybe he's not a good fit for us? Or what do you
I think a team whose strength is defense might be more interested in a ground ball pitcher than an overpowering pitcher. Like Montas doesn't strike me as like a ground ball pitcher, right? Because
no, he surprisingly gets ground balls. He's right around 48%, I believe. But
Yeah.
when I think of Frankie Montas, I think of a guy, there's a good chance he's going to give you 8 to 10 strikeouts a game, just with a big fastball. So
yeah, and nowadays so many teams are shifting. Like, so your outcome is either going to be a strikeout or it's going to go into the shift and either get a ground out or a fly out that way. It's not going to be the old days like the old Cardinals in the 80s where they were like playing defense and, the pitcher was matching up, or like the Braves in the 90s where you had a stellar pitcher who would, play to that defense. I think times have changed a bit. I don't think that's as necessary. I think the Cardinals still value that a little bit, a couple other teams, but it's sort of an exception rather than the rule now.
Yeah, but if I were to make a pick, I mean, I know this isn't really a predictions show, but if I were to kind of make it a little fun, I think I would lean with you where the Dodgers seem, they're right there in California as well. They just seem like a good fit. They have, I think, the prospects value-wise that match up when it comes to a deal. And what I mean by that is you're not having to, throw like maybe one guy of $20 million of value, and then you're having to throw in like, I don't know, 6 more guys of whatever just to make up the difference. That's never going to happen. That's not going to happen. But the Dodgers have some nice pieces where you tend to see for a big name like Montas, maybe like 3 to 4 prospects that would go back. I feel like the Dodgers have that combination now. And I personally think he's a good fit for them. I was thinking the Twins in the beginning of the year were a good fit. We actually almost saw him go to the White Sox at one point. There was a story out there flying around that the White Sox it looked like a done deal, but then it fell apart. So
well, here's my read of that. The only asset that the White Sox had was Vaughn.
Yeah.
And they got cold feet. Like, I think they thought about Vaughn for Montas, and the numbers at the time were pretty similar. I think we had Vaughn like high 30s and Montas was like 38. So it made sense on paper, right? And the A's were like, okay, but I think the White Sox got cold feet. After that, there's a big drop off because they have a really weak farm. And so, and the A's were like, no, if we don't get Vaughn, I don't see it. and that's another sort of key point, is that the A's have been playing hardball. Like, everyone knows they've been trying to trade Montas, but they've set a high price for him, and they haven't caved on him. Like, they don't have to, because they don't have to move salary anymore. Like, they had to move salary in the offseason because the owner demanded it. But now they're not in that spot anymore. Now, they don't have to trade Montas, so they've got some leverage. And so they're just like holding out for the best possible price, the best possible package. They also like to get like an interesting combination of like a high ceiling guy and a high floor guy. If you look at their last 4 trades, that's kind of how they netted out. They got Langeliers from the Braves, who was kind of a high ceiling guy. Pache was more of a sort of a defensive first base, more of a floor guy. At least
that's how I saw it.
Yeah. So and then they usually throw in an arm or two. So like that's the typical A's package that they're looking for.
Yeah, and I think you're going to see something this year. I don't think they're going to hold out. To me, I don't know. I feel like now is the time.
Yeah, it is. They know that because they can play off the bids, right? Whereas if they wait till the offseason, there will be less urgency. So
I feel like with Montas, they are not going to wait until that final minute. I feel like that's a guy who you could see get traded like a week before, because the closer you get, that's when teams. Do you think that teams maybe might start being like, we're not going to play this game. We'll whatever.
Yeah. Well, there's also teams that will play defense against their rivals, right? Like the Dodgers and Padres. Like, remember last trade deadline season, Scherzer was rumored to go to the Padres, and at the last minute, the Dodgers
went live
and said, nope, we got him. Yeah. and so there's gamesmanship going on too between those rivals. And sometimes you'll hear leaks in the press, like the Yankees are interested in Castillo, maybe because the Blue Jays were interested in Castillo. So they're trying to head him off at the pass, Well,
it happened
it happens too.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing with Freddie Freeman or whatever that came out a couple hours. Did you hear about that, by the way?
Yeah, sure did.
Did I miss something? Because I could have sworn it was reported in the offseason that the Dodgers had made a final offer. So did they make another offer after that? Is that what I'm reading from that? Or
well, clearly he's angry with his agent that his agent must have done something wrong or something against his wishes, because he fired him. So you don't fire a guy you're happy with, So
it's just been a drama, like the whole thing, like the last few days, man. But yeah, anyway, moving on here. Moving on. Oh, wait, what was I was going to bring up a point. What was I going to bring up? Oh, yeah, Freeman, because the Rays all of a sudden were getting involved in the offseason, and then the Red Sox were getting involved. And I'm thinking, no, Chaim Bloom's just, he doesn't want to have to go up against Freeman during the year. He's going to say he's interested in Freeman. Because he knows that, because he, out of all the people that knew the Rays, it's Chaim Bloom. He's like, there's no way they're going to spend that money on him. Maybe they're serious about this dollar amount, but we're going to get in there, drive it up, and basically kick the Rays out of it, basically. So
yeah, exactly. So this time you're going to hear a lot of rumors about this guy, this team interested in that team, and that's normal. And some of them are going to be intentional leaks to kind of try to play games with the other teams, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So to drive the price up for the other guys. Yeah.
It's going to be exciting. I think Montas, he'll be on the move. I don't think he's going to end up staying. But
I agree with you. Yeah.
And before we actually move on to the other big picture out there, I just want to go over his teammate really quick, because this is a guy, I feel like he's one of the more intriguing guys that is on here, because his value is quite high. So let me actually pull this up really quick.
Yeah.
And that's Ramon Laureano.
Yep.
So Ramon Laureano, so what is his value currently right now? I've already pulled
it up. In the 30s. Yeah. It's been dropping down a bit.
It has. It was in the 60s at one point.
And then it was in the 40s, and now it's in the 30s, I believe. And we're about to do another update this weekend. So, but let me explain what happened here. And a lot of people are confused by this. He has an extra year of control because of that PED suspension.
Yes.
And sometimes there's confusing data out there, but you know, some sites will say, oh, he's only controlled through, I think, 2024. No, but he's really controlled through 2025, because he didn't get service time for those 80 games that he was suspended, which actually pushed his clock back a year. So in a perverse way, that's benefited the A's, because he has an extra year of control, which means they can set a higher price for him. So he's got 3.5 years of control, not 2.5. And so, and he's not an all-star. He's a solid regular, great defense, solid bat, solid but not spectacular bat. You know, he's had his moments. He's had flashes where he's like, wow, you know, he's hitting homers and coming through in the clutch. This has been kind of a quiet start for him, and granted, he's playing on a bad team right now, but that's why his value has been falling a little bit, because he's like coming back to normal in terms of offense.
Yeah, I think people were confused at one point, think like, why is his value where? Like, because it was in the again, I think it was in the 50s or the 60s. I can't remember, but people were like, how is his value so high? Well, when you look at the contract, he's not a free agent actually until 2026. According to Fangraphs here, but
they're right.
He's always been someone that he can do a little bit with the bat, but he plays a premium position of center field. You don't have a lot of big time center fielders out there, but he gets the job done out there. I mean, more than gets the job done. He's very good out there in center field, and he does enough with the bat to where, you know, teams kind of have to work around him a little bit at times, so he can get into one here and there.
Yeah, totally. And you know, if you look at his WAR numbers, his F WAR numbers in particular, I mean, they were he's a 3 WAR player, right? Yeah. So that's an above average regular, because he has kind of that combination of offense, defense primarily, but offense, good enough offense. You know, sometimes you see these guys who are just glove only center fielders, Juan Lagares, you know, and they can't hit. He can hit. So, you know, that's going to elevates his value, especially when you multiply it across 3.5 years. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if he ends up staying. Because I mean, according to the value right now, even if it drops down to the 30s, that's still a decent amount. Do you feel like they'll end up hanging on to him just because of the control?
So no, I mean, look, they're building for 2025, so they don't need to hang on to him. But they don't need to trade him either. So they're just sort of hanging out, like, you know, all right, call us if you want to make an offer, we'll listen, you know. But there's no urgency right now.
Right? Could you see maybe a team? Now I don't know if this is going to happen, because it just sounds too expensive right off the bat. But could you see Montas and Laureano, maybe a team that needs a center fielder that? Like, oh, you know what? We got to, you know, like the Phillies, I feel like would be a good example. Good pitching staff. They could maybe use a little bit of an upgrade. Could you see a package of Montas and Laureano, like the Phillies just being a surprise team? I mean, again, the prospects, I don't know if they can do it.
Yeah. So
know,
their farm isn't great.
yeah,
They'd have to give up Abel and Painter and
probably Bohm too.
Yeah.
And who
And
knows
so
what Bohm's value is going to be in the next update? I mean,
and they don't want to do. They're in a weird spot because they thought they had rebuilt, but they didn't quite finish the job. And then they, added a couple of free agents, and they're not quite there. So but if they don't have much of a farm left either to trade from, so they're in a tough spot. So in that example, I get what you're saying, but that's probably not going to happen in general.
Maybe not the Phillies. Maybe not the Phillies. I don't know. I'm just throwing off a team, maybe like the Yankees. So, like, I don't know. Could you see these guys possibly being packaged together, or do you think it would be more beneficial?
I don't think so, because it's so much harder to add up. It's basically 2 guys in 30s. That's going to add up to 70. And it's harder to put that package together, because then the other thing is teams are reluctant to trade their top prospects. If you're looking at acquiring $70 million in value, you're giving up Volpe. If you're the Yankees, you're giving up a guy who's in the 50s or 60s. And I'm not sure they want to bite that bullet. Few teams do, because that's the future star they're counting on. So they really would have to say, "Oh my God, yes, we love that guy," or they have to have such a great farm like the Rays. Like, okay, well, it'll make a little bit of a dent, but we'll be okay. So it's harder to make a combination like that work.
I agree, and the reason I bring that up, and actually, I want to touch on what you said about the Rays here in a second too. But the reason I bring that up is because I feel like you see a lot of guys out there. Jim Bowden, my favorite general manager out there. But you see a lot of guys out there be like, "Oh, Montas, Laureano, a few prospects, done deal." Or it's like, I don't think you quite understand, my friend. I don't know.
No, you got to look at it from both teams' perspectives, the needs perspective. You can't just dash it off there. And a lot of fans do that too. And hopefully our site will help guide them into what's real and what's not real.
Right. And speaking of the Rays, now I want to ask this because I know I'll forget. What team do you think is the most dangerous out there when it comes to pulling off a trade? Because the Dodgers, they've given up some prospects now. Last year their farm isn't looking quite as pretty now. Losing Josiah Gray and Kyber Ruiz. It's obviously still got some good pieces, but which team do you think could be the most dangerous out there? Would you still say it's the Dodgers, or maybe the Rays could be sneaky and maybe do something?
The Rays are always sneaky, but it's definitely the Dodgers, because the Dodgers are both a contending team and a team with a deep enough farm to say, yeah, that's worth it. And also because, they've got everything. They've got money to spend on free agents. They've got, and they've got a developmental system where, guys are always coming up through the ranks. Like, there's always the next guy up. Like, it's amazing what they do. Like, that 5th round draft choice pitcher is suddenly worth 25. Like, because they developed them so well. And so they've invested in that sort of at the ground level. So that means they can count on that. So if they trade a couple of guys, cherry pick a couple of guys from the top of their farm, they know they've got a few more they're going to develop and come and replace them. So they're always trading from surplus, And also because they have such a good MLB team, not all those guys are going to fit on the MLB team, right? And they can sign a Freddie Freeman here and there to play first base for 6 years, and so there goes your. So where does Vargas play? Where does Pages play? And so okay, now they can afford to trade those guys.
Really quick, just a quick question in the chat. I see Patrick Smith here. He's asking, White Sox, buyers or sellers? That's an interesting question. Not just for the White Sox, but you got a team like the Angels out there too.
Yeah.
I don't know. Where do you see the White Sox going here? Right now, I feel like it's too close to call. Like
it is. I think they have obviously they came in with every intent of winning the Central, and they've been in the playoffs the last 2 years, and they went fairly deeply last year. So first instinct, you got to think, they got to be buyers. It would be just humiliating to say, okay, we're going to be sellers. But they've got so many injuries that they're not really like, who are they going to sell? But also they have such a weak farm. Like, even if they're buyers, there's not much capital to play with there.
Right.
So they're in a really tough spot. And they don't want to trade Vaughn, and I don't blame him because he's had a pretty good year so far.
Yeah, so top pick the other year. So. But alrighty, let's move on.
One more point. I could see them being buyers at a small level. Like, let's trade for a reliever.
A bullpen guy.
Or one of they need. Yeah, because they can afford that. These guys that are sort of onesie twosie relievers, easy. Any team can afford that.
Yeah. hey, one bullpen guy that can help stabilize things.
Yeah.
I could see the White Sox doing that. Maybe if a guy goes down, maybe, I don't know, bring Quintana back somehow. I don't know, something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. So I can see them being buyers at that level
in a small way and try and just fix it within.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people they tend to. I mean, because that's the boring answer. It's standing pat, fixing what you got within your own team. We've seen it. Done plenty of times. So sometimes just a quick roster move, going to the minors, maybe bringing up a guy, maybe getting another guy more at bats can end up helping.
Here's the thing. The Braves won the World Series last year, and they made 4 trades of rental outfielders, right? And they basically gave up next to nothing because these guys had salaries and they were rentals. So, they picked up a Rosario, they picked up a Soler, and they didn't have to give much money. So the White Sox could probably do that if they needed to fill some holes, just pick a couple of rentals, and maybe they'll get lucky like the Braves did.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Look what the Braves just did this past month. And my Red Sox, you're looking really bad, and then bam, 19-4. I don't want to talk about last night though. Don't even get me started on that. But let's move on to our next player. We're talking Frankie Montas over here. We have to talk about the next pitcher that arguably you could say is the top guy on the market, and that's Luis Castillo. So Luis Castillo, again, we kind of talked about this. They're very similar when you really look at the numbers, even ground ball percentages, fly ball percentages, very, very similar. I think Castillo is a little bit more finesse. Love the changeup from him, while Montas more of a power kind of a pitcher. So Luis Castillo, there's a lot of teams out there that really do make a lot of sense. Montas as well. But what are some teams that you think could end up being good fits for Castillo?
Well, I would say the same teams that won Montas won Castillo. I mean, everybody's talking to everybody right now, right? So these two are very similar and almost interchangeable. They have the same year of control, like I said earlier, same salary, similar profiles. When you look at like what you're going to get, what kind of production you're going to get out of them over the next year and a half, the numbers are almost even. We have Castillo as a slightly higher value because, like I said earlier, I think he's perceived as more of an ace. Like if you can imagine a team that's going to the playoffs, he'd probably be like, if he's on the Yankees, he'd be number 2 behind Cole, right?
Yeah.
And I'm not sure Montas would be number 2. You know what I mean? Because there's a reputation issue there. Like he hasn't been tested as much as Castillo was on a contender last year, and I know Montas was too, but there's just a perception difference there.
I see what you're saying. I get that.
Yeah. So for that reason, I feel like Castillo is going to end up with a big market contending team like the Yankees, like the Dodgers. I know we said Montas to the Dodgers, or maybe, the Cardinals seem like a fit. They're going to be players. They could use another pitcher. Unfortunately, they got nothing out of Flaherty. Now he's on the IL again, and they're struggling to put a staff together, frankly.
Yeah.
They're always sort of bubbling up there in contention.
Yeah. I would say out of the two, I think the Cardinals could be an interesting one because I really do think they have a good team. I think losing Flaherty, which I'm not surprised about, but I think out of those two guys, it would seem like Montas would be the guy that would end up going because obviously the Cardinals and the Reds are in the same division. What are your thoughts on like in division trades possibly happening? I feel like you're seeing it a little more now.
So here's the thing, because it depends on the strategy of the team. Like if the Reds are tanking, they're not going to be competitive until 2024 at the earliest, right? Mm-hmm. So in a way, it's an advantage to trade intra-division because you're basically saying, okay, you take some value now while you need it. We'll take some value later, and we'll beat you later. You know what I mean? So the scales will shift. And so a way of interestingly being more competitive later versus now. So that's why it doesn't matter. Like if they were both competitive now, that's when you don't see it. The Dodgers trading with the Padres, you know. But the Dodgers.
Only time I can think of, sorry to cut you off. The only time I can think of two teams that were competitive was Ottavino with the Yankees and the Red Sox. Like both teams were in good position. And that was weird when you saw it. But I agree with you there where the Reds, and same thing with the A's, like doesn't really matter if they trade. Right. I've always wondered about that. Like, I wonder if, these guys, these general managers, owners, egos maybe get in the way. Be like, no, we're not sending him these prospects. I don't want to deal with these guys down the road. No way. You ever feel like that happens?
I think it happens in very unique situations like the Rockies. Their owner, Dick Monfort, has specifically said, no, I'm not trading my guys to the Dodgers because he's got an ego that's huge. and he's the one who's making the call quite a bit with the Rockies.
Yeah.
But that's pretty unusual. Most of the time it's a GM, and most of the GMs are pretty chummy with each other. They're all on group texts and stuff. So I don't think it matters.
But yeah, so with Luis Castillo, I definitely think my pick for them, I always do this every single year, and they never end up doing anything. It's the Yankees. That's the team. I feel like it just makes so much sense. He gets good ground balls. I love that. They have a good infield defense this year.
Yeah.
I just feel like if there is a year for the Yankees, they're always looked at as a playoff team, but this year, man, with how good they're playing, and that starting rotation is I think it's actually the best in Major League Baseball. If I actually pull up the numbers, they're number one right now, just ahead of the Phillies. But I don't know, when you're looking at regular season and the playoffs, it's a different ball game. Like I'd feel much better going Garrett Cole, Luis Castillo, or Montas, and then Nestor Cortez instead of Nestor Cortez in game 2, where I love some nasty Nestor. I love the mustache, the bucket hat, but when it comes to a playoff game, I'd rather have Montas or Castillo on the mound than Cortez in game 2. That's just how I feel. I wonder if the Yankees will. They did make the moves last year with Rizzo and Gallo, but I feel like this year they gotta pull a trigger. Like they gotta go after a guy.
They definitely do, but to your point, they've already got a strong rotation. Like that's not their biggest need, right?
Yeah.
Gallo has been struggling. Hicks has been struggling. They could use another bat, and they could use another contact bat in particular because they got all these stationary, home run hitting guys.
Yeah.
And so I'm not. Granted, they filled the catcher hole with Trevino very smartly. They can use another bullpen arm, frankly, more than the starter. But maybe it's one of those things where you trade into strength and then you do a separate deal where you trade Tyone or Montgomery to somebody else, and then fill your outfield hole that way. I can see that.
Yeah. Well, speaking of a bat, I'll finish up with Castillo here. One team that I always seem to be hearing about when it comes to Castillo, the other team in New York and the Mets. There were reports out there recently in the last week that that he was atop their list. So, I mean, I'm guessing you're buying that completely.
Yeah, I totally do, because they need another arm. Totally. They've been wrecked by injuries, right? DeGrom hasn't pitched all year. Scherzer's on the IL. They lost McGill. They're struggling with Bassett and Carrasco and whoever else. They need an arm.
Yeah, and then that's another team where they got to pull the trigger too. It's like they've moved all their chips in the offseason, and here you are. I think if you were to maybe go, I don't know, over under, one New York team gets at least Montas or Castillo. Would you think one of the New York teams will get either of them?
I do, and I think it's more likely to be the Mets.
Yeah.
Because
I just they're more aggressive.
I just think they need it more. And they don't like to trade prospects, but they also recognize when the time comes to do so, they do. Like they traded Pete Crow Armstrong last year at the deadline. They'll do it when they need to.
Yeah, and they got some pieces. They got some pieces there. Someone like a Mark Vientos who has he can close the gap in value. I think he's around like 18, around 20 million.
Yeah, and Alexander Ramirez has gone up quite a bit too.
Yeah,
he's right
so they have a couple of pieces there where they can really close the gaps, especially with someone like Montas or Castillo. They seem to make a lot of sense when it comes to being able to, pull off a trade and, matching up pretty well. So,
and keep in mind, Billy Beane is very tight with the Mets front office, so there's that always helps.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see where both of those guys go. You mentioned earlier a contact bat, and this guy, former one of my I would still say one of my favorite players. He will always be one of my favorite players, and that's Andrew Benintendi. Could Andrew Benintendi maybe be a guy for the Yankees?
That makes a lot of sense, right? Because they need another outfielder. He is, to your point, he's a contact bat.
Yeah.
He's having a good season. I think they're done with Gallo and they're frustrated with Hicks. And so they need another bat in that lineup.
Yeah.
So I like it. And he's a rental. So he's not going to cost them that much in prospect capital.
No.
He's going to, we have Benintendi at like 11 or something, that's, one mid-tier prospect or two sort of mid, ish prospects, then, pitchers that like, that's doable for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously Benintendi, he has played a lot at Yankee Stadium. But if we actually take a look really quick, let me share the screen. Let's go here. So if we go to the Yankees right now, so my good friend Josh, he's a big Yankee fan. He was saying, we were talking about Benintendi about a month ago, and he was like, I don't know. I don't know if they're going to get him. I don't know if they really need him. Now, the one thing with Hicks, now that's another thing with Benintendi is he is going to have a pretty, at least in my opinion, a pretty selective market, simply just because he can play center field, but he's not as good out there in center field. But left field definitely is more his position. Yeah, like he performs way better out in left field. So I feel like his market is definitely going to be a little more selective. Now, with the Yankees, the one thing they have liked about Hicks is his on-base percentage. The average is low, the slugging is whatever, but he's got a pretty decent on-base, and they've seemed to be rolling with him. But do you feel like Benintendi would be a good guy to go with here and maybe just have Hicks as your fourth outfielder?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think Gallo's the odd man out there in that scenario. I think they want to just trade him for a low-level prospect, much like they did with Luke Voigt, because I think he's going to warn out his welcome there. So you can see Benintendi taking over for Gallo in left field. Just different kind of player, different kind of bat. To your point, had experience in the AL East. So, yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Not going to cost him that much.
Yeah, and it's crazy how much Gallo has just fallen off. Like that, it just feels like he just needs a fresh start. I mean, my goodness, 62 games. Actually, he's got 9 home runs. I didn't even think he had that many. But the WRC plus is just completely tanked. I mean, them getting him, it made a lot of sense. I mean, people dreamed of Joey Gallo at Yankee Stadium, but it just, I don't know. I don't know if it's a coaching staff thing or if it's a Gallo doesn't want to listen to the coaching staff thing, because obviously he's hit before. So I'm not sure what it is, but it seems
what he has been in the past is very streaky. Like he'll have long hot spells, long cold spells, right? And this seems like it's a really extended cold spell, but it's gotten to the point where like, okay, when are you going to come out of it? And like he may never,
Yeah, it'll be. I think Benintendi. I think there's a market out here for Benintendi. I would say, could the Braves once again go that rental route? Could they maybe go after someone like Benintendi? I think that was actually one of the featured trades on Baseball Trade Values not too long ago. The Braves, I think, are an interesting fit because Duvall out in left field for the Braves has not been performing all that well. That's another kind of like, I mean, really looks like Gallo out here, but he's a power guy. But to me, I wonder if Duvall could be more, a fourth outfielder kind of a guy.
Well, keep in mind, there's some lefty-righty split things going on here as well. Duvall is a righty who hits lefties well.
Yes.
So you can use him as a platoon bat. Benintendi is a lefty. So there's that, And then, you got breakout rookie Harris in center field. You got Acuna in right. That's a pretty good setup.
Yeah, and that's really what the Braves did a lot. Like last year when they lost Acuna, they basically went with a platoon. Yeah. They went outside the box and fixed it that way. Where Duvall, he's hitting a little bit better. I mean, 237 is not great, but, good power numbers. Let me actually go to the advanced ones.
You keep in mind one of those guys can DH here and there as well because they need that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, as you can see here, Duvall at 136 WRC plus against lefties. Benintendi has always done better against righties. But I think, to me, like I know the Yankees look like a nice pick for Benintendi, but I actually like the idea of the Braves a little bit more. I mean, they did it last year with getting some outfielders. Why not do it again? If you were to lean one team for Andrew Benintendi, where do you think?
I'm going with my first thought, which was the Yankees, which we talked about for all those reasons we said. But I can definitely see the case for the Braves. Don't underestimate the teams that may be hovering around 500-ish, maybe to second or third in the standings, because they want to try harder.
Right,
They're
right.
trying to get over the top, right? And that's what the Braves did
Absolutely.
last year at this time.
And then some other teams I've seen with are connected to Benintendi. I've seen the Brewers as a possibility. I've seen some people out there suggesting the Brewers. It feels, I don't know if it feels like, I mean, you could definitely, Andrew McCutcheon's a righty, but then Yelich would have to move, to the DH spot. I feel like it would create a lot of, it would be, I don't know. Do you feel like it would be an awkward fit for Benintendi in Milwaukee?
Yeah, I could see it. And because he's a rental, he's not going to cost them that much. Their farm's not great. They got a couple of pieces. On their farm, they're not moving Churios, their new top prospect. He's just been an animal. But there's a couple of guys beneath that, and that could maybe, like Weimer or Mitchell, that they could maybe move. So I could see it from a fit standpoint. Probably not my first choice, though.
Yeah. We actually do have a super chat from Joe Girardi hater. Barlow and Benintendi to the Phillies for outfield guys. So that sounds like something the Phillies could afford when it comes to sending prospects back. They could always use another bullpen arm. What do you think about this?
So I always look at it from a value standpoint. So Benintendi's about 11. I haven't checked Barlow lately. I think he's 10-ish somewhere.
Yeah, I think Barlow's around there. Yeah.
So you're looking at 20-ish in value here that the Phillies would have to cough up to the Royals. So in prospect capital, so then you got to think what the Royals need. Logan O'Hoppe is probably not a fit because they've already got Salvador Perez and Melendez, so they don't need O'Hoppe.
Yeah.
So they would ask for one of the pitchers, Abel or Painter, and one of those guys would have to go. Probably Painter is a little more risky. But I don't know if the Phillies want to part with them. Those are their top two prospects. Other than that, you're piecing together it's hard to see a fit. So if I look at it from that standpoint, I could see it from the Phillies' point of view in terms of getting the bullpen help and the outfield help because they lost Bryce Harper, obviously.
Right.
But I just can't see it from the Royals' point of view because they're back picking and choosing from the farm. I'm not sure unless they're moving Abel or Painter for those guys.
Yeah.
Now I'm not sure they would. Then it's hard to find a match in value.
Yeah, with the Phillies, I think they could make it work right now. As of right now, you got Hall in the DH spot, and you got a whole bunch of guys on the bench with Harper out. So you could just slide Benintendi into left, and then Schwarber can be the DH. Oh, I hate seeing Castellanos out as the right fielder. That's brutal defensively.
Totally.
And that's the thing with the Phillies. They really had, if Harper went down, that was going to be just a negative impact just all the way around because you're not just losing a bat, but then you're having, Castellanos, to move out there and right.
Yeah.
I guess you could keep him at the DH spot, but I don't know. You're going to have to move guys around now, and Castellanos and right. That's just brutal. But I guess it could work right now, but Harper will be back eventually. So when he comes back,
don't you think it'd be too little too late at that point? Like if he comes back in September, they may be out of it.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think that's the thing. We're still a month away. And as we've seen, these teams can really turn things around, very quickly. So, or they could turn things around for the worst. So we'll have to wait and see on that. I think teams, you're going to see the market just naturally open up more. Better fits are going to just happen. Guys are going to go down. Guys are going to struggle, so on. Yeah. So I think you'll end up seeing it naturally work out. But maybe the Phillies. Let's talk about the next guy. So earlier, I was talking, or actually, no, let me stick with this. I'll go back to that guy in a second. But we're talking about outfielders. So here's a guy I feel like you're not hearing too much about, which I don't know why, because he's having a really good year, but that's Ian Happ on the Chicago Cubs. I actually really like Ian Happ this year. Let me share the screen here. So Ian Happ on the Cubs. Last year, he got really home run happy. Really tried to just get into him a lot. Ended up getting, I think, around 25 home runs. Yeah, 25 home runs last year. Mm-hmm. But that's never really been his game. Mm-hmm. Now, this year, he's focused on just making better contact. Batting average is up. Now his on base is up too. He's being better. He's showing better plate discipline. And I think Ian Happ is a really intriguing guy out here because he also has a year of control. So he's not really he's not a rental like Benintendi. So Ian Happ, I think, is a really interesting one. What are you thinking about Ian Happ?
Completely agree, because he can play decent center field too. And for a while, he was like a hybrid center field second base guy, like you see some of these guys. And you can still stick him at second if you wanted to, but I think he has more value in center. It's a higher value defensive position.
Yeah.
And to your point, he's having a really good year. It feels like this is the year he's putting it all together, because he's always had flashes, and then he will like go into a slump, and then he's terrible for a while. Then he's up again, and he's down again. Like he's finally putting it together here. So it's like now you think, all right, you've got a year and a half of good Ian Happ, assuming he stays good at this level, because I think he's in his prime now, age-wise. Usually they peak at like age 27. So he's right around there, I believe. So he's peaking. So this is a good value as well. Now, obviously, we just talked about the Phillies, and they could use a center fielder as well. I know Miami's been looking for a center fielder, but I'm not sure it makes sense at this point because I'm not sure they're contenders anymore.
Right.
So there again, you think maybe the Yankees, with their Hicks problem, I mean, because they've been playing Judge in center field. I mean, yeah, great, but I mean, come on, he's not a center fielder.
Right.
So, I could see that.
That's been weird.
Yeah, so you have this sort of domino effect. If you put a guy like Happ in center who's having a good year, move Judge back to right where he probably belongs,
right?
And then you can, to your point earlier, use Hicks as a platoon guy, fourth outfielder guy, and whoever's playing left. Stanton really should belong in DH spot. So I think that fills a hole for them. But what do you think about Happ to the Red Sox? That was the other sort of thought I had.
That's interesting. I could see, it was funny because when we got Schwarber last year, I'm thinking, man, did we really need Schwarber? I felt like we could have used maybe like another guy for the bullpen or something, but I didn't hate it. And then obviously it really worked out. Happ could be another interesting one because, right now, I feel like they won't end up doing it just because has really been good. Ref Snyder right now is starting in Toronto, but with the Red Sox and their outfield situation, I do think, I'm not trying to make this a Red Sox show here, but I do think Jackie Bradley is going to get DFA'd soon. Yeah. I honestly really do think. It's funny because I've been listening to some other Red Sox podcasts out there, and they're like, oh, yeah, JBJ, just put him on the bench. I don't think so. Because the way Ref Snyder's playing, he's playing good defense out there too. So I feel like they're going to end up, and because with Duran, if you kept Jackie Bradley Jr. and Duran and Verdugo, you got 3 lefty bats, and to me, Ref Snyder just balances it out better. Yeah. So I feel like right now, I don't know. Would I rather have Happ over a Ref Snyder? Yeah, I could say that. I think
better track record. Yeah, Ref Snyder has been a career journeyman, so you got to think, well, how long does it last, right?
Right. But I think right now I'm okay with just going with Duran out there.
Fair enough.
One of the outfield spots. So Ref Snyder when Duran's out, okay, yeah, I'm okay with that. Happ would be very nice right now, but I really like what Duran's been doing. I think it's just giving the Red Sox a different look in that lineup. I feel like they've kind of struggled out of the leadoff spot this year. They've been mixing and matching guys in there, and it feels like they've finally found someone. So I feel like the Red Sox, I think they could be an interesting fit for Happ, but I feel like they're just going to roll with Duran. Cora's had nothing but good things to say about Duran, since really being called up. But
I think the other fit for Happ would be the Padres, because who's struggling badly this year? Trent Grisham.
Yes.
He's starting to wake up a little bit, but he's had a terrible first half, to be honest, to the point. And if you look at the progression in the last couple of years, he's been decline. Like, I'm not sure. Yeah, he has a track where he had that great sort of start with the Padres, but I think the league kind of figured him out. So I'm wondering if the Padres, and Preller is always aggressive, he's in win now mode. So maybe this is a spot for Happ.
Yeah, I actually love the idea of Ian Happ with the Padres. It just feels like they need another bat. I know Profar is having a good year. Yeah. I just feel like I don't know. If I were to go with a Happ or a Profar, I feel like Profar has always been more of like that utility kind of a guy, can move around a lot. Yeah. And he'll find at bats. But like to me, if you have a chance to get Happ, guy who can hit from both sides of the plate, I really like that. I mean, even if you kept Profar there, I mean, I think Will Myers is hurt right now. I think he's on the IL. Yeah, right. Has his knee, so he'll be back in there eventually. But I think Happ would be a really nice complement to this lineup. He gives them, the versatility aspect. That's the problem with Benintendi, is really he's gonna be a left fielder. That's really his drawback. Whereas someone like Happ, he has that versatility. He can hit from both sides of the plate. So that's why I'm hearing more, or at least I'm hearing more people, at least on like, the Reddits and stuff, or articles being made on like fan-sided and stuff like that about Benintendi. I don't see anything about Ian Happ. So
yeah,
to me,
I think, to the Padres, I think, he's going to cost you a prospect or two, some decent quality, because his value is, last I checked, in somewhere in the 20s, maybe going up a little bit even more. Now, the Padres farm is not what it used to be, because they sold off so many of those prospects. Right, graduated, and Gore graduated, and Abrams has been playing in the big leagues. So, like, there's not much left on the farm. You got Robert Hassel and a couple of, like, recent draft picks, but there's a drop-off there.
Yeah.
Well, like, the question there is, do they have the match? Like we were talking about earlier. When I look at it, like, they're going to have to cobble together something to get Ian Happ. I'm not sure they can.
Unless that'll be interesting.
It's one of those guys like Ryan Weathers, who kind of had his shot, but he's not really, he's sort of neither here nor there. Like maybe you can throw in one of those guys with the prospect,
Yeah. Well, now I want to ask you this. You asked me if the Red Sox would be a good fit. How do you feel about the Rays for Ian Happ?
I like it. I mean, they thought Josh Lowe was going to be their center fielder. It wasn't quite ready. And so, I mean, I kind of like it. They can certainly afford it from a trade capital perspective. And the Cubs would say, let's pick from the menu here. They got this guy and that guy. I mean, you can see a lot of different combinations, and the Rays would barely make a dent in their farm. Right. So I like it from a value perspective and from a sort of a match perspective. So the only question left is, does he fit their lineup? And my first instinct is but I think we're taking a look here.
And the only reason I ask is just because, out in right now, you have Harold Ramirez. He's come through in some spots.
Yeah.
But
he's a good team guy. He's a righty that hits lefties, and that's about it.
Yeah. So, like, I don't know. I just like the idea of the switch hitter, like Happ there. They've been having injuries. I mean, if you look how many guys they have on the injured list. Lau, Kiermaier, Margot, 2 outfielders right there. I mean,
exactly. I mean, Kiermaier's on his last, he's got his last year of his contract, so they're going to pick up the option next year. So, Happ kind of makes sense as a Kiermaier replacement in center field, and with a better bat to boot. So I think that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and maybe Lowe, he has options. He can always go back down.
And he's not just a center fielder. You can put him in a corner too. He's got
right. So with Lowe, I mean, he still has a couple of options, so he could definitely go back down. So I feel like, and with the way this offense has been lately for the Rays, feels like they need a jolt, kind of like what they were looking for with Cruz. Well, it felt like last year with Cruz, they were trying to get that last piece of the puzzle, but this year it feels like they need a jolt. That's why Paredes has been amazing for them.
Yeah, that was a good deal. Yeah.
Oh my God, like that. Oh.
And now Meadows is injured again. I'm like, whoa,
it's the Tigers deal. I think the Tigers got ahead of themselves there. I think they did. All right. But, I think the Rays would be an interesting fit. I actually just saw a question here in the chat that I do want to pull up here. It was a good question. Because this is another team where hold on. No, that wasn't the question. Oh, yeah, here we go. From Nick for CJ Cron. I feel like this is a guy you're not hearing too much about. Mets trading for CJ Cron would be rad.
I don't get this one. First instinct. Like, he's a right-handed first baseman. Last time I checked, we got Pete Alonso, right-handed first baseman in New York. And, got JD Davis, right-handed corner guy, DH guy. Like, why do you need another one of those guys?
Yeah. I would think if they did want to go after a guy that, you can split time with in first base, DH, maybe Josh Bell. We talked earlier about.
And he hits lefty, so there's that.
Yeah, so maybe he would be give you a little more variety. You know, it
He's
would be
basically the
division,
more
but
accomplished version of Dominic Smith, who has been a disappointment. Yeah,
right. So
he would be.
CJ Cron, I see the thinking behind it just because it feels like they need another bopper in that lineup. You got Alonso there. But it does feel like they could use another power bat in the middle there, a guy that can really just drive in some runs. But
Yeah.
I'll be honest with you. You know, this one might be a little out of left field. I know you said the righty thing. I was looking at Mancini's expected numbers. He would actually have 17 home runs right now if he was on the Mets. Like it's funny when you go look at the illustrator on Baseball Savant, a lot of his fly balls would have made it out in Citi Field's weird, but I don't know if the Mets end up going after a guy like Cron or Mancini or Bell. I think they probably need to be paying attention to a starter, someone for the bullpen.
Exactly. I was just about to say, this is not one of their bigger needs. They need a starter. They need
like could they use it? Sure. Yeah. Kind of like the Red Sox with Schwarber last year. Like, it's fine. But yeah, I think do you think Cron will end up going anywhere?
You know, on paper, you would think so. It should make a difference. But like the Rockies, like you can never like figure out the Rockies because they just do their own thing. They're in their own world. They like to keep their guys, and they seem to like Cron. So even though you think they should trade him, even though and he's under contract for another year, so he's not a rental. Yeah. So you know that tells me they're probably not going to trade him just because they just like to keep guys.
It's a little different, whereas they just signed him to that extension where, you know, they just brought him back. Whereas other guys who have been, or they're getting towards free agency for the first time, a little different with Cron. I think he ends up staying, but interesting. I mean, hey, I wouldn't hate seeing Alonso and Cron back to back.
I will say, he's been one of the more underrated bats in the last couple of years. He continues to just, pound the zone and, get good numbers, and nobody talks about him.
Right. Well, let's shift our focus back to some pitching. How about another guy? We're talking about Luis Castillo a lot. Let's talk about the other pitcher that's out there at Cincinnati, who I think could end up making a pretty big impact with another team, and that's Tyler Mahle. What are you thinking here about Tyler Mahle? More of a fly ball pitcher. It doesn't get as many ground balls as, say, a Castillo. But Mahle, I feel like for me personally, I feel like the two, I don't know if I would even say two. The first team that I think of would be the Twins for me personally, just because they have a good outfield. So the fly, just seems to be a nice little fit there. And I feel like they could use another starter. Another team that comes to mind, maybe not so much recently, but their starting pitching wasn't very good for a little while. It's also the rotation also looks pretty full. Maybe the Mariners, if they wanted to go after a starter, maybe someone like Mahle. I feel like that's not really a high need for them, but maybe. I like the Twins for Mahle. What do you think?
I like the Twins as well. Obviously, the Reds and Twins got together in the offseason with Sonny Gray, so they know each other well. So Mahle's been quietly kind of creeping up in value as well. He started off a little rocky, but then he's really put it together. And so he's up into like the high 20s. So he's not quite in the same tier as Castillo and Montas, but he's kind of in the next tier. He's a mid-rotation guy, pretty solid actually. And his expected numbers are pretty good.
Yeah, better than his ERA.
Yeah, exactly. So don't look at ERA, fans. You got to look at all the other sort of numbers that the front offices tend to look at. They focus more on process, not outcome. So an ERA is a noisy stat with things out of the pitcher's control. So you got to look at the things that the pitcher can control: the strikeout to walk ratio, the FIP, the xWOBA. Those are your important stats. So Mahle's been, getting the job done more and more lately. So I think he's like the third pitcher on the market, which is why you've got him third here, I would imagine. I think the next obvious question is, would the Reds package Castillo with Mahle? I don't think so. I think they're going to try to maximize the value one at a time.
Yeah. I feel like you don't ever see, like two big starting pitchers like that. Well, Mahle's more mid-tier, but you never really see two guys like that. I feel like it's probably been done before, but I can't think of one off the top of my head. But
and also like we talked about earlier, you got to find the right package of prospects that makes sense for you if you're the Reds. Mm-hmm. So you might not get it unless you separate them. You might say, okay, the Twins have a good sort of combination that fits Mahle. The Yankees have a good combination that fits Castillo, what have you. So you get kind of the best of both worlds that way.
Yeah, and if we go really quick, because we were talking about Castillo and Montas, their values are anywhere from 30 to 40 range. But with Mahle, you're looking at under 30, right around 26.6 million as of right now. Yeah. I feel like the Twins would be able to get a deal done here.
Yeah.
I feel like they have a few good, mid-tier kind of guys. Maybe someone like Balazovic you could send back. I don't know, throw in a couple more guys here. I don't know, just whatever. Cantorino.
Or you could use Austin Martin as the lead piece.
Yeah, Austin. And that too. He hasn't really found his footing.
No, he's dropped a bit, but he could definitely, you could see him being a lead piece. And this would be interesting because he was the lead piece in the Barrios trade last year, and his stock has dropped since then. So it's almost a history repeating himself if he were.
Right. So I mean, if you're looking at Martin and Cantorino right now, Cantorino, I believe he is a top 10. I think he's number 9. I could be wrong about that, but you're getting pretty close here. Maybe one more, low tier prospect somewhere in the 20 to 30 range, maybe even 15 to 20 that gets a deal done. I think Mahle makes a lot of sense for the Twins. Just he fits their team, good outfield there, good outfield defense, and then he's not going to cost
control. I'm sorry. He's got another year of control.
Yeah, that too. And Twins would like that.
Now, one other point I would make is with Mahle in particular, because he doesn't cost as much in prospect capital, you might see more bidders. You might see
that too. Yeah.
You might see a team that, like the Rangers, who were hoping to be competitive this year, but not quite. Maybe but they're thinking, okay, well, we want to be competitive again next year, so maybe let's just get him now, and we'll have him next year too. Teams will do that.
Yeah. We have a question here in the chat. Let me stop sharing here. This actually is about my Red Sox. Now we're talking about Tyler Mahle. Panda Waffle is asking, would Mahle to Boston make sense? Now, I just think of the fly balls. I don't know. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean he would be bad at Fenway. I don't know. This isn't going to be the end all be all, but just a quick little reference. He actually would have given up less home runs at Fenway this year. Funny enough. So, but I wouldn't mind it. I think if you can add some starting pitching anytime, I'm never going to hate that because you don't know what you're going to get when it comes to Chris Sale and how's he going to be health-wise. You have no idea what James Paxton is going to give you. Garrett Whitlock, Nathan Eovaldi, their hips are broken right now. I don't know what's going on with them. More Eovaldi right now. Whitlock should be back soon, but Mahle I could see I guess if it's, kind of the right time, right place kind of a thing, I could see Bloom doing something like that because he does have a year of control. I could see that potentially. I wouldn't be surprised if Bloom adds a starter. I feel like bullpen right now, everyone's trying to improve their bullpen. But I feel like if there is a team that really does need to focus on the bullpen, it's probably the Red Sox. It feels like they need a guy. I don't know. What do you think about Mahle to Boston?
Wouldn't be my first instinct,
same.
I think there are teams that need a guy like him a little bit more, like the Twins. I even thought about the Brewers. I know we're intra-division again, but Woodruff's down, Peralta's down. They basically got Burns and whatever. So they could use another starter.
Yeah, maybe even a team. I don't know. Maybe a team like the Giants, possibly.
Yeah, I mean, the Giants are always cagey. They're always looking for. They're zigging when other people are zagging, but maybe they're thinking, they've cobbled together a rotation. Basically, they got Logan Webb, but then they got a bunch of guys that they signed off the market: Rodon and Wood and Happ, and those guys. I don't know. One of them could break because they're all injury prone, right? So maybe they're thinking, let's be on the safe side and get a guy, in reserve. So I could see that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of bullpens, let's shift. You know what? Hold on. Well. Yeah, let one more guy because we'll get to this guy in a second. I was going to shift to the bullpens, but we got one more guy, and then we'll get to his teammate right after that. Let's talk about Jose Quintana. I feel like this is a guy that actually could be a pretty underrated piece. First team that comes to mind for me, I mean, it wouldn't. I could see this fan base being pretty disappointed getting Quintana would be the Mets if they were to fall out of the Castillo and Montas deal or Montas trades. I could see them maybe going after someone like Quintana for depth. But I feel like he's a pretty intriguing one out there just because he's got good numbers this year. It looks like he's really found his old form, 15 starts, 3.60 FIP, having a pretty solid year. Do you feel like he's one of the more underrated guys out there? Do you?
Yeah, I mean, everyone thought he was done, and and the Pirates signed him for peanuts. And I thought when they signed him, he was a little bit undervalued. Actually, they got a bargain there, and now he's starting to show some life again. So I think it was a really smart signing by Pittsburgh, and they need to cash in on that value that he's created for them. So he's definitely going to be on the move, and he's not going to cost a lot in trade capital because he's a rental, because he's got a spotty history, and he's older. So any team can afford him. I can see the Cardinals affording him. I can see the Giants. He seems to fit their profile. Even, I know he used to be on the White Sox. Now there's a guy they can afford from a trade capital standpoint.
Yeah. You could see a reunion here. Yeah. And another guy possibly, maybe Jordan Lyles, possibly. He's got the club option for next year, but this is a guy I feel like could be someone. The ERA doesn't look great. The FIP is kind of just whatever, but he's throwing a lot of innings. I wonder if a team would like something like that, like a depth kind of a guy. I feel like you could see these guys, like not these big name guys, be on the move, who could make some impact for some teams down the stretch. What do you think about Jordan Lyles? Do you think he could end up being someone that ends up moving?
So here's the opposite of Quintana. They overpaid for him in Baltimore. His value is negative. I don't think I think they paid like $8 million or so, and he's worth like 3 or 4. So, he's a depth guy. so they're going to have to kick in some money just to get a minor prospect back. So I can see them doing that. And I don't think he's more than a 5th starter on a contender. So that's guy.
Yeah. So, I'm not really seeing much with Jordan Lyles, but definitely Quintana. I feel like he's going to be pretty sought after. But now we can move into the bullpen guys. I feel like he is going to end up staying. David Bednar. He's got a ton of control. He's one of the more interesting guys out there. Now with Bednar, I want to point this out with Bednar. Pittsburgh is a very pitcher-friendly park. That's the one thing, and he's a fly ball guy. If you look here, 31.6%. I actually plugged in Bednar into a lot of different ballparks on Baseball Savant. He would be horrible at Fenway. I do not want the Red Sox even going near him. A lot of his fly balls would just go over the monster. Yeah. So don't want any part of that. But I feel like after I've looked at all the teams, one team that makes sense based off of the fit, do they need a bullpen guy, the ballpark, and kind of just the nature of how they operate, would be the San Francisco Giants. That's what I'm thinking for David Bednar. I could see them really liking someone like him. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think he ends up staying? Do you feel like it's going to end up costing too much?
No, he's got multiple years of control. Pittsburgh's bringing up prospects. They've got a bright future. They have no reason to trade him. He's still pre-arb. Because of all that, because he's one of the top closers in the game, and all that control, all of that adds up in value. Like, we've got him over 30 in value, and so like teams will go, whoa, that's too expensive for a reliever. And he's a great reliever, and we know relievers are volatile. We've baked all of that in. Let's assume he's gonna regress. For the next couple of, even after you do that math, he's still worth over 30. So they're not moving him because I think they have sneaky plans to contend. Maybe not next year, but the year after that.
I think they're pretty close.
They are really close. Yeah, they got a couple stars now that they brought up. Cruz and Hayes, and so I think they're getting there. So Bednar would be their closer of the future, and so I think they'd have to be blown away by an offer to move.
Yeah, and I don't see the Giants make sense when it comes to the fit, because I feel like they could use another guy for the bullpen. With the ballpark, obviously, and I could see them liking someone under control. But then the sticking point with me with the Giants is I don't see them going out of their way to spend all that much on a reliever. So David Bednar to me is kind of like the perfect storm when it comes to, like, a lot of people are going to look, oh, he's on the Pirates, bad team. Oh my goodness, he's not a free agent until 2027. oh my goodness, look at these numbers. Like this guy's the perfect trade candidate. But I think to me, it's a perfect storm. I don't see him getting moved either. I do think the Giants would be a good fit because when you put him into that park, a lot of his fly balls, they stay in the yard. So
the other
thing right now, it's good.
If you look at it from Pittsburgh's perspective, their farm is so strong. It's one of the top farms, even after graduating Hayes and Cruz. So they've got a whole bunch of more guys coming. They don't need more prospects. They're at a point now where they're pretty much done with their rebuild in terms of getting quality prospects in their system. Yeah. So what's the payoff for them? You could use Bednar for your closer when you get competitive, maybe as soon as next year, or you could just add yet more prospects to the system. I don't know that they need to add yet more prospects. So there's no reason to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I don't see really a need because you're seeing his name, like all these lists that are starting to come out, like, top trade candidates. Bednar, I think on CBS Sports, I think they had him at the top of their list. And I'm like, I don't see him getting moved. And really only a couple of teams I think would make sense. And when your market is that small, I don't see him getting moved. But
I think it's lazy journalism, to be honest. I think, good player, bad team. He's got to be traded, and not thinking more than that. They got to say from perspective.
I will say this because I am a stickler for the journalism out there. A lot of it is just hot garbage. But I will say this. CBS Sports, I will give them some credit. I've read a couple of good things from them. There have been some not so great things, but I do appreciate a couple of the guys that are over there. Now, maybe the list that I was reading earlier maybe wasn't the greatest, but I have read a couple of different things with them, so I'll back off of them a little bit. But there are some other ones out here, I agree, lazy. But another guy that is not very lazy this year, who's having a great year, David Robertson. David Robertson, now this is the opposite of David Bednar, where he is a rental. He's not a lot of money when it comes to this to his salary, so he's not going to cost a whole lot. Having a great year, veteran guy in the closer role this year. He's been phenomenal. Now, David Robertson, this is a guy I wouldn't mind my Red Sox going after because he is a ground ball guy, good defense for the Red Sox, but this is a guy where I said with Bednar, I feel like only a couple of teams are really going to make a call about him. I could see a lot of teams making a call about David Robertson. Do you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he's not going to cost much. You're getting bang for your buck here, and you're only getting him for 2-3 months. So why not? Now the big red flag is he's 37 and he's had a lot of injuries. So there's always sort of a clock ticking with him. Like, when's he going to break down? So you have to bake that risk into your price, which is what we've done. Now granted, you do see relievers still being effective into their 30s, but once you get into your late 30s, it tends to fall off quite a bit. So that's the risk with him.
Yeah. I see teams, and I keep talking about this defense, but I look at the ground balls. He gets a lot of them. He gets a lot of strikeouts too, 12 strikeouts per 9. Not a big fan of the 4 walks per 9. So I don't think that's too big of an issue. But I really like the idea of Robertson on a lot of teams out there. I mean, my Red Sox come to mind right away. The Yankees, a reunion with them seems like it could make some sense. Even a team in the division, the Cardinals, they could make some sense. They've had some injuries in their bullpen this year. I feel like he would make a ton of sense for just a lot of teams. Maybe the White Sox, was he on the White Sox before? Yes, he was on the White Sox before. So maybe a reunion with them. There's a lot of teams.
So there's some rumors that there was some bad blood between him and the Yankees. I'm not sure to what degree that's true, but Yankee fans are always referring to it when I see them on Twitter talking about him.
Oh, interesting.
Like, I'm not sure what happened there.
I don't know. Well, I guess we can cross the Yankees out. So good for my Red Sox. Let's go.
I don't know. Robinson. But then I think, this seems like a perfect AJ Preller candidate. Because he's always looking for bullpen help too. He had Pomeranz, and he went down, and he's cycling through options for a closer. But then again, they're up against the luxury tax limit, so their options are very limited.
Right.
They've been trying to move Hosmer. They've been trying to clear salary with some way, shape, or form. Trying to move Myers, so they've got very little wiggle room in terms of picking up salary. So that's going to hurt them unless you know, unless the Cubs want to kick in cash and they get a better prospect back. Maybe that happens.
And it's not even just Robertson in this bullpen. I feel like a lot of guys are up for grabs here. You got someone like Scott Efros, who's having himself a pretty good year. You got Chris Martin, who's having a pretty good year. Efros this year, and he has a lot of control, similar to Bednar, but I feel like he's not going to be. I feel like he's around like a $10 million value. I could be wrong.
No, I don't think he's that high even, because he was basically. Yeah, and somewhere in there,
5 to 7 maybe.
He was not a prospect. He was just one of these no-name guys that sort of found a pitch and then started creeping up. So he's sort of in the process of establishing his baseline track record still. So far, so good. But, you know, history is, you know, there's a lot of these types of guys who just sort of are one-hit wonders and then they fall off. So there's that danger with him. Yeah.
And then you got someone like Chris Martin, who is a free agent sooner. He's having the ERA is a 4, but the FIP is almost a run lower. I feel like he doesn't walk a lot of guys. I feel like there could be some calls about him. This Cubs bullpen, you got Michael Givens is there as well, one of the setup guys, having himself an okay year when it comes to the ERA. I don't like the FIP, but ERA is okay. But I feel like if any of these guys end up staying, it could be just Givens. But
Givens has always had stuff, but not so much in the way of results. And he's overpaid. So it's like, you know, he's undervalued. I mean, he's underwater actually in our model. We always knew he had the stuff, and then one day he's going to put it together. But at that point, you know, who knows? But you know, it's been like I think he had like one good year when he put it together. But he's always been more of a tease than a guy who's actually really dominant.
Yeah, out of all these guys, I do think Robertson ends up going. I could see maybe a team taking a flyer on Efros or Martin. Efros, I mean, the thing about him is he just has all that control. So I wonder if the Cubs would end up maybe, you know, asking a lot for him. So he's having a good year. Look at the FIP. He's not a free agent until 2028. Give us your top prospect. No, I'm just kidding. But I could see that. I could see these 3 guys end up staying. But Robertson, I definitely think is going to be
he's moving.
I don't see why you hang on to him. There's no need. But there is one more guy, and this is actually the guy that maybe it's a little more heart over brain. But then again, it would be a pretty good move when it comes to his numbers, and that is Daniel Bard. I would love to see Daniel Bard come back to Boston and just throw some flamethrowers again. I would absolutely love this. Bard, I think, is a really intriguing guy out here. The thing with Bard, I just wonder how teams feel about Bard, just because he had the yips. He was gone for a long time. He's looked good over the last couple of years. Well, last year wasn't great, but he was showing good strikeout numbers. Now the ERA and the FIP are down. But he's been okay the last few years, but I wonder, do you see teams really looking at Bard, or do you think they'll be scared away?
No, absolutely. They'll look at him. But caveat again, he's also 37 and wear and tear is on him. Maybe a little bit less than Robertson, because he had kind of some time off in between, but you know, he is putting together a good year. So that's going to be attractive, and he is a rental. Now he's not cheap in salary terms, so that's going to limit his market a little bit. You know, especially with those teams at the luxury tax limit. So but there will be a lot of calls about him. Now, the other thing is he's on the Rockies, and you can't predict, you know, the Rockies may not trade him. I don't know why.
It'll be interesting. But I think Bard, I mean, what a story that would be, you know, if he ends up coming back to the Red Sox, you know, because it seems like I don't think it's going to end up happening. I feel like when, you know, these things are too good to be true, when it just looks so good on paper, this good story, it just won't happen. But I could see the Red Sox going after David Robertson. I feel like that could be something. Just really depends on what the market's going to be looking like. I could see Bloom falling out of that market really fast. You know.
I don't think it's going to take a lot to. I mean, you know, right now he's, you know, low single digits. So
would you say though that that could end up making it just so much more complicated? Just because, you know, it's like. It's I don't know, like just all these teams are like, oh, really? That's all you need? Oh, okay, we'll bump up our offer a little bit over here. So
exactly, and you know, I mean, it's not going to be a crazy overpay like Kimbrel was last year, but it's,
Yeah.
it'll be an auction,
Yeah.
he'll get up a little bit.
Yeah.
One team that we haven't talked about much, I don't know if they need bullpen up that much, is the Astros, but they're going to make a move and they're always kind of sneaky, so don't forget about them.
Absolutely. They're just, I don't know what it is. Like everyone just could not stop talking about the Astros and the trash cans for so long, but like, no one ever talks about the Astros now. I feel like you're hearing a little bit more about them.
They just
now.
No-hit the Yankees in their home.
Yeah. So once they were playing the Yankees and then they just beat up on the Mets this past week, now you're starting to hear about the Astros. And I've been saying I'll say this, I'm going to be looking back at my preseason predictions soon. I went all in. I went with the Mariners in this division. I went for it. I thought, okay, they got the momentum. This is the year. And nope, that's looking terrible. You can't pick against this team. They're just too good. Every year they're well, besides the whole trash can thing, whatever, they're just a well-run organization. They develop these guys extremely well. And that's the thing. They don't have a great farm system, but it's like they have these guys that they know will be able to step in. Tucker for Springer, Pena for Correa. They just do really well. You don't ever see them making, besides when, they've made a couple of trades in the past, with Greinke, and they ended up getting Verlander too. But the last couple of years, you're not seeing big flashy trades. If you were to pick one area for this team, because they're pretty decent all the way around. The bullpen looked pretty good.
I think center field may be an opportunity just because they've,
Jake Myers.
They haven't quite settled on, they got, I don't think anyone's sold on Jake Myers. So,
right.
There's a fit for Laureano came from them originally. I don't know that he's going to go back there, but Happ is another option there.
Yeah, absolutely. And, one guy that is staring me dead in the face, and I actually had this guy penciled in as a guy that I think the Astros needed to go after, but now I don't think they're going to, because we just saw them almost no-hit the Yankees for 2 games, was going after someone like Willson Contreras for the catching position to upgrade the offense. But I don't know. It seems like they like what's going on with Maldonado.
They do.
They don't seem to be fazed by the bat.
No. They love him. Obviously, they renewed his contract at least once. No, he's a leader on their team. He leads that pitching staff. He knows them, so well. And so it ain't broke, don't fix it. I don't think they're touching that.
Yeah. So speaking of Contreras, this is another guy we have not really touched on. We're getting towards the end here, but this is a guy where, hey, really good season from him. He's having this is a great season. 387 on base, almost a 500 slugging, almost a 150 WRC plus. He's a rental. I feel like he's going to be around like 15 million-ish. I feel like he's in that range.
He's somewhere between 11 and 13 the last couple times I looked. Yeah.
Yeah. With Contreras, that's the thing. You don't ever see catchers get moved. And I just wonder, what's a team that could really go after Contreras?
Oh, I know the team. I got you.
Let's hear it.
Willson Contreras, you are a San Francisco Giant.
Oh, man. Oh, that's Bart not doing well? Oh, yeah.
Bart's not doing well. Casali, the backup catcher, is like, and then he traded Austin Wins this day. I'm like, come on, they need a catcher.
Yeah.
And they're struggling really to keep up with the Dodgers. And, now to your point, it's hard to trade a catcher in the middle of the season because, there's so much involved with that position. They have to get to know the pitchers and their signs and their tendencies. And so it's hard to kind of just pick that up midstream.
Yeah.
But he's also kind of a bat first guy, right? So, and, he's been around the block. He kind of knows the game very well. So I think if anybody can pick him up pretty quickly, it's him.
Yeah. One team that I thought could, I probably won't see it happening, getting back to the Rays. I wonder if the Rays could end up getting into it.
Maybe.
Just because they could use a bat, or at least maybe, Yeah,
they could use some catching help. Zunino is basically having a lost year and he got hurt. Yeah.
I guess he was having, he can't even feel his arm or something like that. Yeah. But that was a big blow because I think Zunino, in a lot of ways, to the Rays was kind of the glue of that team. He was so underrated defensively and just a huge power bat. And I feel like Contreras would be a really nice piece for them. And you got Mahle there as well.
And to your point, they kind of need to be woken up, and he's kind of got an electric personality that I think would wake them up.
Yeah, I would I would hate it, but as a Red Sox fan, but the fit, it just seems like a good fit. You got a lot of personalities on this team, and I feel like with him, I don't know, I think it would just be really nice fits. But I agree with you on the Giants too. I think the Giants can end up being really nice. That's a team I don't ever think of very much when it comes to. Here's the thing with the Giants is that they're basically the Rays of the National League. Like, they're just so weird with how they do things. Platoons all over the place. I just never know what this team is going to do.
Yeah, they're always making transactions at the bottom of the roster. Let's try this guy. Let's try that guy. And then, once in a while, it's strict. Once they get a Yastrzemski, okay, we found one.
Yeah.
Or
and we know, and we know they'll do the rental. They did Bryant last year. Right. So they'll go for the rental. And who knows? Maybe you could even figure out an extension somehow. I don't know. But I think it's interesting. But I would actually say these are my two favorite teams for Contreras would be the Giants or the Rays. Yeah. So do you think another team could pop? We're hearing the Yankees for a long time. I don't think the Yankees.
No, I think the Yankees are happy with Trevino. I think they're set now.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to do that.
And the Giants, from a valuation standpoint, from a farm standpoint, if you're the Cubs, you're looking at the Giants farm and you think, okay. I mean, there's a couple of mid-tier pieces. It wouldn't take that much to get Contreras.
Yeah, and they know each other from the Bryant trade.
Right, exactly. So I think they could put it together. The Rays obviously have a ton of options in terms of their farm, so that would be intriguing to the Cubs as well. So either one of those would fit.
Another intriguing option. I mean, James McCann, it seems like that has not really worked out. I don't see this, but I've seen Mets fans suggest Contreras.
Yeah.
I don't see it personally, but
I could see it. Yeah. I mean, they're rolling with Nito, right? He's getting a lot of time back there. Yeah. And he's a backup catcher that they're using as a primary catcher quite a bit. So I could see them needing that upgrade. Yeah. I would also say, Contreras is not only a rental, but he's not cheap in salary terms, so everyone can afford him. Yeah. So, I can picture that. Yeah. They made a deal last year with Baez. So they know each other as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And there is actually one more guy that someone suggested in the chat. And this is a guy, I don't think he is going to get moved, but it's a name that we have been hearing going back to, I feel like, the last couple of off seasons. Now, I'm just going to pull this up but I'm not pulling this trade up. I'm pulling up the player more specifically. Bryan Reynolds. Hey, Josh Bell maybe in Tampa too. That could be a decent fit. But I do think if there is a team out there for a Bryan Reynolds, could be Tampa. They definitely got the pieces.
Well,
I think they would like the control.
Yeah, he's got 3.5 years of control. Crazy expensive. Got off to a slow start, but he just hit 3 home runs today, I think. Yeah, he's on fire.
Yeah.
So we have his value at like 80. There's not that many teams that would pony up the prospects, which is partly why he hasn't been moved. But the other part of it is Pittsburgh has no reason to move him. We just talked about the Pirates.
Yeah, and that's again, I don't think they're going to move him.
Yeah, I mean, he's kind of one of their backbone stars, so there's no reason to, unless somebody makes a crazy overpay. And he's already, like I said, priced at 80 on our site, and it's hard to put that together. I mean, the Rays are one of the few teams that could, it's hard to see. I just, I don't think the Pirates want to move him. I think they're settled on him. So
yeah, I think that window is come and gone. I think you heard of teams like the Padres and the Brewers. They were supposedly being aggressive for him in the offseason. I could see now, if the right offer came along, maybe, but I don't know. Could you throw an Abrams at him? And then a couple.
I mean, Abrams is, hasn't quite gotten off the start you would hope. But again, he's a kid. He's 21, right?
Right.
He has a really bright future, but he isn't quite there yet.
Right.
But where are you going to play him in Pittsburgh? Because you just brought up O'Neal Cruz, and there's questions about whether he's going to fit at shortstop defensively or not. But he's actually looking pretty good there, and he looks like a superstar. Yeah. So like he's their version of Tatis, maybe even. So So
I think Bryan Reynolds, that's a guy I've been thinking of the last couple of years. I'm like, why don't they just build around him? Like,
yeah, right.
Like, it's not like he's a free agent in a year. It's like,
that's basically what they're doing. They start with Reynolds, then they got Hayes and Cruz, and they're starting to fill in the gaps. There's more coming. So, like, there's no reason to trade him.
Well, we do have a super chat here from Conman752. He's one of our loyal Orioles fans. He's been coming to the streams for a long time now. So he's been happy because I've been talking positive about the Orioles this year. But he has left a super chat. Just joined the stream. Thoughts on O's trading any of Mancini, Santander? That's a guy.
Yeah,
and then Lopez as well. That's another guy where who they can try and target. I think a near MLB ready pitcher. I mean, I think Mancini will definitely get some calls. For me personally, I think just the problem, with, guys like Bell, there's not like any clear cut fits out there. I feel like you're going to have to kind of squeeze them in and then rotate and whatnot. So that's the only problem I see with Mancini. Does have the versatility of the outfield. So that helps. Santander, that's an interesting one. I think Lopez, I actually was looking at maybe the Astros as a fit for Lopez. I mean, he would be a good fit anywhere, but I feel like with the Astros, again with the infield defense, very good infield defense, but Lopez gets a ton of ground balls. But I don't know. What are you thinking with the Orioles? What do you think their plan is going to be?
So the Orioles in our model have the best farm in baseball. So and they're really, a lot more great talent coming. They just brought up Rutschman, but there's more coming. So it's not like they need to build the farm because it's already quite strong. So the reason to trade these guys would not necessarily be for that reason. It would be because they are on expiring contracts. Mancini, let's take them one at a time. To your point, some markets are more liquid than others. So Lopez is going to have a liquid market because everybody needs relievers, and he suddenly found a new life as a great reliever. Like, he was a bad starter for a long time. He had a terrible track record. All of a sudden, he finds the key to life as a reliever and even as a closer, and he's come to life, and it's great. Now they could maybe cash in that chip, and they probably should. He's out of options, so if he turns south, and they have no other options, so I think they probably should just go on the safe side. Mancini, he's got that sentimental value. And there's and he's making quite a bit of money this year, and he's, not much defensive value, and, he basically just has power. So there's not going to be much of a market for him. So I kind of feel like if you're the Orioles, you might as well just keep him for the sentimental value, because you're not going to get much of anything. You might even have to throw in some cash, because we have him slightly negative right now. Santander is your big piece. Not to say it's a huge value, but he's in like the low double digits, like 10, 11, 12, maybe even going up. He doesn't, he's not an all-star. He strikes out a lot, but he's got power, and he's a solid bat, and he's got another year of control, I believe, maybe even 2 years of control, if I remember correctly, after this. So he's not going to fit your rebuild necessarily. So you might as well move him if you get the right offer. You don't have to, but you get the right offer, you could. But you'd at least get fair value for him. So so that's probably your most the piece you're going to get the most out of.
Yeah, I think he could be an interesting one. And another guy, and this is another guy we were hearing in the offseason as a potential trade candidate. Bit of a slow start, but he has been heating up recently. Cedric Mullins. Now, Mullins, I mentioned the Phillies earlier as a team that could use a center fielder, maybe even the Yankees. Maybe not the Yankees with Mullins, but I feel like the Phillies, again, the prospects would be tough. But, Mullins could be a pretty good fit there. Maybe, possibly the Padres, maybe the Brewers. You could see some teams like that. But Mullins, I think, is interesting. If we look at his value as of right now, still at least as of right now, before your update, about $53.5 million. So he would be tough to move. Do you feel like they end up hanging on to him at the?
I do. He's their version. Yeah, he's the Orioles version of Reynolds, I think.
Yeah.
No reason to. He's got so much. I think he's got 3 years control after this, so 3.5 total. And there's no reason to. Like I said, you've already got a strong farm, so you might as well build around him with the pieces you've got coming up. Because you're probably going to contend. In fact, they're already outperforming expectations this year. And somebody tweeted the other day, like, if the Orioles were in the AL Central, they'd be in contention. Like
Right.
they're too far away, and there's more cavalry coming. So
Yeah.
you might as well keep him for that run because you're going to be maybe even competitive next year. So you got 3 good years of competition out of him. So let's keep him and build around him.
Yeah, I did want to point this out. Con man point, because I read this. I don't know where I read it, but he said, I've heard the Marlins for Mullins, and so I guess the word out there, the Marlins would like to upgrade the outfield a little bit, according to some reports.
Yeah, I mean, the Marlins have been publicly leaking that they've been trying to get a center fielder for ever since, like a year ago. Like in the offseason, they were after Mullins and they were after Reynolds. And now recently they're after Laureano. So but they don't quite have the prospect mix for that. And the teams that they're talking to don't necessarily have to trade these guys. So they're sort of at an imbalance. So you may hear some things, but it doesn't mean a deal is imminent. That just means they're talking, but that, teams talk all the time. Doesn't mean anything's happening.
Yeah, I agree. And, you could get a deal done. But to me, I don't know. If I'm the Marlins, I want to hang on to Meyer, Watson. Like, really, these two guys are like really nice pieces in trades because they're not too little. They're not too much. The values are kind of like that nice sweet spot where you can add, one of these guys, a couple other guys. And you could get something done. I don't know, but if I'm the Orioles, I'm kind of, I don't know. I just feel like, I don't know. Would you do, if you were the Orioles, would you do this trade?
Probably not.
Yeah.
Because you don't need to. I think you only trade Mullins if you're blown away with an overpay.
Yeah. I think if you added on, like, all right, we'll give you, we'll throw in, I don't know, Burdick, or maybe not even Burdick, like,
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like one of these other guys up here too, where maybe it ends up being like a 10 million surplus, maybe something like that, where, they bust through the algorithm of what it's supposed to be. But I don't see the Marlins doing it. I think Mullins to me has always seemed like an off-season kind of a guy, just because his value is just a lot. You don't ever see these very, I don't know, who was the last guy who had like a ton of value get moved at the deadline? Like, I can't think of a guy. Like, you always see like someone like Scherzer where he had around like.
Well, Trey Turner was the bulk of that value because he had.
Turner. It ended up working out because of the package. So
and Barrios was in the 40s when he was moved last year at the deadline.
Like a guy that was more. I think Turner's value was in like the 60s, right?
It was. Yeah.
I'm thinking of a guy. Yeah, you don't ever see. You could see obviously those guys, but like I'm thinking like guys in like the 80s to the hundreds. Like a Reynolds. I can't think of a guy.
No, that tends to be more of an off-season thing. You think about the Yelich trade, which is the highest value one I've seen since I started looking. Like he was in the low hundreds, and I did a piece about that. Yeah, but it's rare.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure we're in store for a good deadline, but I think that's all we're gonna do.
Sounds good.
We've talked about a ton of players here. There's definitely a lot more, but we're going to try and do this at least once a week, and hopefully we start seeing some more rumors come out. There's not really a whole lot of rumors as of right now. So I figured tonight, good night to kind of just, get our feet wet, bring up some guys, get used to their names a little bit. So, but I would like, to me, I think with the deadline last year, that deadline was just insane.
Yeah.
But this year, I feel like we could see another pretty decent deadline. What do you think?
It's hard to predict. Things are quiet right now, so
they are quiet.
Yeah,
they are.
But the thing that may move the market is the fact that there's an extra team in the playoffs this year. They're going to go 6 deep instead of 5 deep for your league, which is going to create more contenders, more buyers.
Yeah.
The market's going to be healthy for that reason, I think.
Yeah.
But I think we still need clarity. There's those teams on the Phillies, the Angels. Like, are they buyers? Are they sellers? You're not quite sure. Yeah. So we'll have a little bit more clarity as we go here.
Yeah, I think so, because you have a lot of teams. Like, if I were to pull up the standings really quick, there's so many teams that you like, and it's also kind of another thing. I think the Red Sox and the Braves inadvertently maybe kind of hurt the market a little bit, because it's like, oh, well, the Red Sox, they just won 19 games this past month. Well, we can get right back into it. Like the Angels and White Sox are probably thinking that. you could see La Russa easily think that.
Yeah.
But that's where there are teams that are like, and like you said, you know, you have the extra playoff spots. Let me actually pull up the standings really quick here. So, I mean, even look at Baltimore. I mean, I don't think they're going to end up doing it, but they're only 6.5 out.
Exactly.
I mean,
right.
my goodness. You know, it's like, what the heck is going on in the American League wild card? You got the White Sox 4.5 out, and that's even playing not great baseball lately. 4-6 in their last 10. And Cleveland 1.5 games. I think Cleveland, we didn't talk about Cleveland at all in this. We talked about Cleveland. Me and you have had a conversation about Cleveland's farm system before.
Yeah.
It's funny because they have a great farm, but you just don't. Because they're a team, like, I would love if they went out and got Luis Castillo. Like, I think that would make a ton of sense on paper because, again, he gets a good amount of ground balls, good defense over there. I think he would fit well with that team. But I just don't see them doing it just because, well, they know they're going to have to probably pay, try and pay the guy, and they're not going to do that probably. So
yeah, and when you think Cleveland, you think pitching staff because there's always that rotation, next man up, next man. They just keep doing it and doing it.
Right.
Bieber was hurt, not quite the same as the old Bieber. So maybe you can make a case that they need another high end pitcher. But yeah, I'm squinting a little bit. I guess I could see it.
They make sense because they could use another starter.
Yeah,
but like Montas and Castillo would be great, but they're not going to do it because that's not their philosophy. They just don't do it. So Cleveland, I think, is an interesting one out there because that's the thing. They have the firepower to go get a deal done.
And they need to move some of those prospects because they got a roster crunch coming because they got more guys to add to the 40. They got too many infield prospects. So they've got to move some of those guys. So they're a team to watch to get something. Yeah,
I think they will. And because, I mean, look where they are. And in the National League, Phillies are 3 out in the wild card. Miami's probably out of it by now, 8 out. But you got a dogfight right now. You got the Giants who are 1.5 games out of a wild card spot. So right now for the wild card, you're looking at Padres, the Cardinals, and the Braves with the Phillies and the Giants right there. So it's just so close to call, especially in the American League. In that those couple of teams in the Central with Cleveland and the White Sox. And you got the Rangers and the Angels too, and the Mariners. The Mariners are playing great baseball lately. Yeah. Maybe my pick for the division can somehow come true. They got a long way to go, but the American League is more log jammed right now, I would say, because you got the 3 teams in the Central, you got all those teams in the West. I think the Angels and the White Sox, they're going to get back into it. They're just too talented. I just don't. That's crazy if they don't get back into it, but. Oh, man, I got to ask you this. One more before we get out of here. One more. I did a video on Shohei Ohtani. Do you think, let's say the Angels fall out of it. Let's say they fall out of it. They're done. 10 out, game over, checkmate. Do you think they should trade Ohtani?
No. Well, let me rephrase that. Should they? Probably. Will they? No.
No, I agree. They wouldn't. There's no way Artie Moreno would do it.
No, Artie Moreno.
Talk about egos, but
and he loves his stars. He overpays for stars. He keeps. He tries to keep his stars. You know. Think about when Mike Trout, before he signed his extension, everyone's talking about, oh, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? They're going to trade him. No, they signed him to a huge extension. So I can see them already thinking that way with Ohtani.
It's just gonna be big, 3 big contracts, like one that's already not good, underwater on, and then oh my goodness, I don't think they trade him.
They are the quintessential stars and scrubs team, right? They've got Trout and Ohtani, and then whatever else. So like they need more balance, and they've always had that problem.
Yeah, they look better coming into this year, and they look good. The bullpen looked better. They had a couple more starters. Offense had a little more length, and I don't know, but man, oh man, if they traded Ohtani, I mean, that just sounds ridiculous saying it, but they'd get a nice little package of prospects.
They would. Even though he's only got 1.5 years control. I mean, because he's a 2-way player. I mean, there's a lot of surplus there.
I think next year will be interesting, especially if there is no deal. If there's no contract extension, oh boy, you're gonna and if he's healthy and pitching and hitting well, oh my God, there's like You would have. I don't even know if they would do it next year at the deadline either. I don't know. I don't think Moreno would do it.
Yeah,
because he's just looking at the ticket sales. So
yeah, and he's also got Dodgers envy. That's always been his problem because he plays second fiddle to the Dodgers and he sees them winning all the time, and he really wants to keep up with the Joneses. So he doesn't want to get rid of his stars for that reason.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we're going to end the first episode. We'll do it again next week. I'm sure there will be at least one rumor to sink our teeth into. But either way, we'll even if there's nothing, we still got plenty more guys to talk about. So
that's good.
We only talked about 10 to 12 guys tonight. So there's a lot more guys. Maybe if we don't have any rumors for next week, maybe we can talk about some underrated guys to keep an eye out for, something like that. But John, well, thank you. This is great. Good first episode of this. Really enjoyed it.
Love it.
But everyone in the chat, thank you for the couple of super chats here. We had 100, 150 people the entire time. So that just goes to show people like their trades. So, but we'll be doing this again next week. But everyone, thank you for coming out tonight. I appreciate it. And we'll talk to you next time.